I'm going to present this case a bit differently, as it's one that strikes me as being particularly senseless, though a supposed motive is provided. After researching the case, I revisited the two distinct and significant elements of the story that are purported to have caused the crimes. To be honest, I did this with a disgusted, prove-it-to-me attitude. I needed the killer's retelling of events to prove that these two elements, the two things that formed the rock and a hard place he was trapped between, were so severe that they justified his crimes by any stretch of even a warped imagination. Now, I know this may sound a bit odd, but this particular killer was a cowardly young man who, after confessing to his crimes, recanted his confession and denied having committed them. He has remained emotionless and unbearably pompous since then, choosing to act as though he were a victim rather than the perpetrator, while pinning the blame on an innocent dead person. Most upsetting, though, was the figurative pissing on the graves of his victims that took place with his recent release from prison. Please let me know what you think of this case and of this killer in the comments. Harry William Frederick de la Roche Jr., way too many names, was brought up under the watchful eye and the heavy hand of a strict disciplinarian. His father, Harry Sr., who I will refer to as Sr., grew up without a father. He found his sense of security and his identity by fortifying himself through acts of discipline and inner strength. He served in the Navy during the Korean War, demonstrated a strong work ethic in the export department of the Ford Motor Company, and earned a degree by attending night classes at Seton Hall University. In 1958, Sr. married a kind, loving woman named Mary Jane. They lived in Lodi, New Jersey for several years while they saved money and built their family. They had 3 sons during this period: Harry Jr., Ronnie, and Eric. Sr. then moved the family to the far more affluent and visually pleasing town of Montvale, New Jersey. He had strong ideas about what a family should be, and was strict and conservative with his children in his effort to see them become disciplined, successful men like himself. Like many men of his time, unfortunately, Sr. maintained the image of his perfect family with the use of violence. Though there is no indication that he was physically abusive toward Mary Jane, he certainly abused his sons. Harry Jr. later reported that his father often whipped him with his metal-buckled Navy belt, picked him up by his hair, and threw him down staircases, among other abusive acts. His mother, he added, never intervened. Sr. ran the house and was not to be questioned, so his sons learned to keep their thoughts and feelings to themselves while towing the line. Harry Jr., being the oldest, was expected to set the example for his younger brothers. Born on September 23, 1958, Harry de la Roche Jr. was delivered 3.5 months premature. There had been a few miscarriage scares during Mary Jane's pregnancy, and Harry Jr. was not fully expected to be born alive. He would spend several weeks in an incubator before being deemed healthy enough for discharge. Called Hatchie by his parents, Harry Jr. experienced a difficult first several years. Short and skinny for his age, he had hearing issues that would require surgery. He spent additional time in the hospital for breathing issues. Through these experiences, he developed a strong fear of doctors and would often vomit on the way to medical appointments. In school, Harry was bullied for being small, quiet, and wearing glasses. He joined the Boy Scouts, where he excelled, but was bullied there as well. In middle school, Harry had a growth spurt and was then made fun of for being gangly. He just couldn't seem to catch a break. By the 8th grade, he decided that he would no longer let people see how they affected him or how he was feeling. During his time at Pascack Hills High School, he remained relatively friendless among the 1,300-person student body. He ran track and field for only a short time, as he didn't care much for sports. He did, however, play baseball in a town league in order to please his father. Sports were big in the De La Roche family, and his younger brothers, Ronnie and Eric, took to them naturally. Unsurprisingly, Harry eventually got lost in reading and existed for the most part in his own head. The one thing that did unite the De La Roche men was firearms. Harry, Sr., Ronnie, and Eric all spent a lot of time at the pistol and rifle range in the neighboring town of Park Ridge. They all enjoyed shooting guns, and Harry came to be an accredited marksman. Mary Jane hated guns, but Sr. kept several in their home. When Harry graduated high school in 1976, he applied to several colleges, including some military academies. He was waitlisted by Ramapo College, his, quote, safety school, and received rejection letters from the military academies due to being legally blind without his glasses. The only school that accepted him was called the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, a school that guaranteed a military assignment upon graduation. As this would essentially set him up for a successful future, his parents were thrilled, his father in particular. People who knew Harry, however, were not sure that military school was the best fit for someone like him. Harry had heard the stories about military school. Freshmen were treated harshly, and people like him were likely to be viewed as easy targets. Upperclassmen were basically in charge, and some of them abused their power. The Citadel, established in 1842, was a school that prided itself on developing leaders. Obedience to authority was a prerequisite to admission. On one hand, one could imagine Harry doing quite well there, having grown up obeying his father so diligently. But on the other hand, Harry De La Roche Jr. was certainly no leader. The whole family made the trip to South Carolina with Harry. He was anxious, but as usual, kept his feelings to himself. Arriving at the Citadel on August 23, 1976, they took in the impressive campus and attended a freshman banquet that night. When his parents left, Harry decided that this would be a new start for him. No one there knew anything about him or his past, and since he was there, he was going to make it work. Here is what Harry reported as having been his experience during his first 3 months at the Citadel. I'm bullet pointing it in the interest of brevity. Your head is shaved so as to remove your identity and forge a new, stronger one. There was a simple misunderstanding on his first day where he was not in attendance for something, and he claims that he was screamed at. He quickly felt as though the bullying he'd experienced throughout his life would continue here. Upperclassmen order you around, and you are to respond only with yes, sir, and no, sir. You're not to speak on campus unless spoken to, and you're yelled at and belittled a lot. Freshmen had to move off of sidewalks if upperclassmen were passing. With physical endurance being very important there, freshmen had to do running drills and push-ups. Mealtime was very difficult. Freshmen had to serve upperclassmen and anticipate their wants as they ate. Sometimes freshmen were forced to eat without using their hands. On one occasion, an upperclassman tossed him a glass to catch and it shattered on his plate. Harry became defiant relatively quickly, which only made things worse for him. He was apparently not playing his part as a freshman, and though he was spoken to about rank and discipline, he did not fall into line, which pissed people off. Failing to keep up on his hygiene, Harry was told he stunk and that his uniform looked unkempt. As for abusive behavior on the part of the upperclassmen, he was forced to twirl around until he was dizzy and was then pushed by an upperclassman. His head struck a dresser and he claimed to have suffered a concussion. He was forced to carry a heavy rock around campus for a short period of time and claims that it bruised and perhaps cracked his ribs. Drunk after a night out, some people came into his room, cut his leg, and poured nail polish remover into the wound. And finally, on another occasion, he was kicked in the groin until he passed out. All freshman cadets were going through the same experience as Harry was, but they somehow seemed to persevere, perhaps keeping their heads down and not provoking upperclassmen with defiance. I'm not saying that any of what was happening in terms of hazing was acceptable, but at the time it apparently was accepted and went unreported. The simple view of things was that Harry and his peers would be upperclassmen after less than a year and, quote, the bullshit, as Harry called it, would be over. He reported having many good times at the Citadel as well. He went out and drank with peers who encouraged him to do his best and to soldier on. Harry said that he didn't hate the school, but that he hated a few people in it. This sounds a lot like life to me. Liking everyone you encounter at school is simply unrealistic. And really, what other options did he have? He wanted to drop out, but he was scared to tell his parents, especially since they had taken out a loan to cover his tuition. What did he want to do, though? He'd been working at a gas station and was rejected from every other school he'd applied to. Additionally, the idea of military school was not forced on him. Yes, his father had served in the Navy during wartime, and his parents were happy when he told them where he'd applied, but he chose to apply to military schools. During his 3 months at the Citadel, Harry kept up written correspondence with his parents and his brother Ronnie. Ronnie kept him current on the happenings at home, while his father, honestly, came across quite unlike the man described by Harry during his youth. Senior reminded his son that hazing wouldn't last forever, that he could take it, and that this experience was setting him up for the rest of his life. An easy life if he could just stick it out. He believed that the school helped cadets to be fine men, and he wanted Harry to believe it too. He told Harry that he was an outstanding young man, and that the whole family was behind him. They sent him clothes and supplies consistently and offered to help him in any way they could. Senior encouraged Harry to be strong and honest and to be proud of what he did, to work hard, do his best, and not to be afraid to sacrifice to get ahead. Ultimately, he wrote, he wanted his son to have a wonderful experience in school. Unmoved by his parents' words, Harry told them that he would finish out the year, but that he then wanted to transfer somewhere else. Their reply was that dropping out or transferring to a lesser school that he could get into, my words not theirs, was a bad choice. Senior also warned him that quitting, along with being a poor decision, can become a hard habit to break. Harry stopped writing to his parents, though they continued to write to him. They told him about how they anticipated his letters and how excited they were when they received them. Repeatedly asking for reassurance that he was doing okay, they encouraged Harry to confide in them and not to hold anything back, but said that they couldn't help him if they didn't know what was going on. Harry seemed to be hiding his grades from his parents. They asked for updates, but he shared none of his progress reports with them. Ultimately, things were left with Harry and his parents agreeing that they were looking forward to his first return home for Thanksgiving. They would send him his plane ticket, and the whole family would meet him at the airport. What no one in his family knew was that Harry had lied to the faculty at the Citadel in order to leave early for the holiday. Quite callously, he had told them that his mother had cancer and that he needed to be home with her. As planned, Harry is greeted at New York's Kennedy Airport by his family and driven back home to Montvale. During the ride, they excitedly ask him about his time at the Citadel, but Harry indicates that he will tell them about it later. When they get home, his mother presents him with a homemade welcome home cake, and his father offers him a beer to celebrate him now being of legal age. While home, Harry spends most of his time working on his Ford Mustang and riding around attempting to meet up with the few friends he has. He sells his prized coin collection for $1,600 and uses the money to purchase new tires for his car and an expensive watch. He is very clearly going out of his way to avoid his family. He's decided that he will not be returning to the Citadel, but he is not ready to tell them about this decision. November 28, 1976, 3 a.m. It is now a few days past the holiday festivities, and only 7 hours remain before Harry is scheduled to board a plane headed back to South Carolina. He sits on his bed, knowing he's given up and that he will not be returning to the Citadel, but still fears speaking with his parents about the finality of his decision. He has to tell them, but he does not believe that they will listen. He walks back and forth from his bedroom to the entrance of theirs many times as they sleep. Finally, he enters their room and stands beside his father, holding in his hand the .22 caliber pistol he'd removed from Senior's nightstand only a few hours earlier. He stands there for at least 30 minutes, lost in turbulent thought. Then finally, he utters the words, "I can't go back," points the gun at his father's face, closes his eyes, and squeezes the trigger 3 times. One bullet enters Senior's right eye, one hits the pillow, and the final bullet strikes him in the head just behind his left ear. Now beyond the point of no return, Harry circles the bed, approaches his mother as she stirs from sleep, and shoots her once in the forehead. He walks down the hall to his brother's shared room and flicks the light switch. 15-year-old Ronnie lies on his side with his eyes open wide in shock. Without hesitation, Harry points the gun at him and shoots him once in the head. Turning around, he sees his 12-year-old brother, Eric, attempting to stand up, and shoots him twice in the head. Harry returns to his room, sits on his bed, and begins to take in the gravity of what he has just done. He is interrupted, after only a few moments, however, by the sound of heavy breathing. He follows the sound to his brother's room and finds that it's Eric, somehow still alive and attempting to get up from his bloodied bed. He is speaking, but Harry is unable to make out what he's saying. He approaches and places his hand over his brother's eyes. He tells him to go to sleep. It's all just a dream. Eric, however, begins to scream and kick at him, so Harry spins the gun around in his hand and begins beating him with it. He cracks Eric's skull open, but does not stop striking him until he's certain that Eric has stopped breathing. Harry then places a rag over the hole in Ronnie's head and carries him up to the attic, attempting to keep his blood from spilling onto the stairs. When he returns to his brother's room, he notes the significant amount of blood pooled on Ronnie's bed. He then goes to his parents' bedroom and retrieves his father's body. He drags him to Ronnie's bed and lays him onto it face down. Harry wraps the gun in the rag he'd used to cover Ronnie's bullet wound and hides it in a dresser drawer in the basement, sliding a weight bench up against it. Back in his bedroom, Harry removes his clothes and buries them in the back of the closet. He showers and redresses before going downstairs, grabbing the keys to his mother's car and driving off. A little after 4 a.m., Harry is seen running his mother's car through a stop sign only blocks from his house. Just as Officer Carl Olson is about to pull him over, Harry stops the car and leaps out into the street. He yells to the officer that his family is dead. They're all dead. Officer Olson approaches, intending to calm Harry and clarify what he's just heard, but Harry gets back into the car and speeds away in the direction of his home. Back at the De La Roche house, Officer Olson and Harry enter via the side door and walk through the living room. Harry climbs the staircase to the second floor about halfway, then stops and says they're up there. He walks to the living room couch and sits down as Officer Olson continues up the stairs. When Olson enters the master bedroom, he is struck by the sight of Mary Jane's lifeless body on her bed. Blood surrounds her head, and there is also blood on the adjacent pillow. Shaken, he calls into the station to report the apparent murder. More officers arrive quickly, and Harry reports that he'd arrived home a little before 4 a.m. and found his family dead, with the exception of Ronnie, whose whereabouts are a mystery to him. He left immediately in his mother's car and was on his way to the police station when Officer Olson spotted him. Police locate Ronnie's wallet and glasses on his nightstand and mention how odd it is that he would have left home without these items. In response, Harry indicates that his brother has been using and selling drugs, immediately making Ronnie a suspect. Harry is taken to the Montvale Police Department at 6:30 a.m. He goes over his story again as police search the crime scene for evidence. Spent .22 caliber shells, blood-stained bedding, pieces of blood-stained carpet, and much more is tagged and removed from the home. After some time, officers suggest that Harry submit to a lie detector test in order to rule himself out as a suspect, and he agrees. In his retelling of these events, Harry acts as though these standard procedures the police were putting him through were grueling and dizzying. They were not. 3 members of his family had just been murdered, as far as the police knew. It is not until 12:15 p.m. that police finally move the 2 laundry baskets that sit in front of the attic door and make their way upstairs. They immediately come upon a brown metal locker with some boxes and Christmas decorations on top of it. When they look inside, they see human feet. Someone has been stuffed into the locker face down with their legs bent. It doesn't take much time for the body to be identified as Ronald De La Roche. There is no gun present, and he certainly could not have locked himself in the box, so he is clearly another victim of the original incident. Soon after, police locate the gun in the basement, as well as Harry's clothing in his closet. The officers questioning Harry at the station are notified as to these discoveries. Harry has no answers for them, so they take him to have the lie detector test administered. Unsurprisingly, Harry fails the test. After holding out for several hours, he finally provides a full confession. He is placed under arrest and transported to the Bergen County Jail in Hackensack. While there, he is examined by a physician. He has no apparent injuries and reports no physical ailments. Apparently, most of the abuse he had suffered while at the Citadel had been emotional. The funeral for the 4 deceased members of the De La Roche family is held on Friday, December 3rd. 5 days after his parents and brothers are laid to rest, Harry has a change of heart and asks to speak with his attorney. He goes on to claim that his original confession had been given under duress and that he now wishes to tell the true story of the night of November 28th. According to Harry's revised account, Ronnie had killed their parents and Eric that night. Harry got home and found his parents' lifeless bodies before coming upon Ronnie in his bedroom where Eric lay on the floor, presumably also dead. While questioning Ronnie as to what had happened, Harry heard a sound escape Eric's mouth, a breath or a groan. He went over to cradle Eric in his arms, which is apparently why his clothes had blood on them. Ronnie told him that their father had found his drugs and was going to turn him in. Believing that Eric had just died in his arms, Harry grabbed the gun that lay on Ronnie's bed and killed him in a fit of rage. Officers, now having to put this new, absurd confession on record, began pointing out the very apparent holes in Harry's story. Again, he has no answers to their very rational questions. He simply repeats that he had messed up and done some illogical things in the heat of the moment. As to his reasoning for giving his initial confession, Harry claimed that he and Ronnie were both guilty, so he'd chosen to be the martyr and take the blame for all of it. Evidently, he blamed himself for not doing more to help Ronnie, as he was aware of his drug issue. No one was buying it. Harry's first confession had been far too detailed and lined up too precisely with the evidence found at the crime scene to have been fabricated. While awaiting trial, Harry is given a psychological evaluation and is deemed competent. He acts like a grieving victim when he chooses to review the crime scene and autopsy photos of his dead family members so that he can be prepared when he sees them in the courtroom. In actuality, he would be under no enforceable obligation to look at them. After recanting his original confession, the focus of his thoughts conveniently shifted to the possibility of getting out of prison, changing his name, and going on living. If he was not acquitted, however, he wanted to go to a hospital rather than to prison, of course. Harry De La Roche's trial began on January 5, 1978 at the Bergen County Superior Courthouse. The prosecutor offered a plea deal, but Harry outright denied it and wanted to proceed with the trial. He said that he expected to be killed in prison, so he would rather roll the dice and try to walk away free and clear. The prosecution presented Harry as a murderer attempting to blame a brother he'd killed for his crimes. They laid out substantial, compelling evidence and dwelled uncomfortably on the brutality of the murders. In closing, their final words to the jury were, "Don't let the truth become Harry De La Roche's 5th victim." They did not. On January 26, 1978, the jury returned verdicts of guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder. Harry was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Before being transferred to prison, he was permitted to visit his family's gravesite at George Washington Memorial Cemetery. While being reviewed by the parole board on 6 occasions, Harry remained painfully unable to delve into what had happened or to provide any insight into his emotional development. Someone like him could simply not be expected to reintegrate into society without ever having honestly assessed himself. He was, quote, unable to recognize and understand the depth of his emotional issues and how those issues affected his behavioral choices, per the board. Harry spoke with flat affect like an empty vessel when dealing with these highly emotional issues. He'd done nothing to substantiate his suitability for parole. However, after spending 45 years in prison and being denied parole for consistent reasons during that span, Harry De La Roche Jr. was released on May 17th of 2023. 64 years old at the time, he was placed into a residential community program, so he is living in a group home somewhere in New Jersey at this time and will experience a high degree of freedom that he either does or does not deserve, depending on which of his confessions you believe. Harry, throughout his life, seemed to take things on, find very quickly that he didn't want to do them, then act it out impulsively as a release mechanism. He preferred living in his mind to exerting actual effort in his life, and this was never going to lead him anywhere good. What did he want to do rather than attend the only school that had accepted him? Continue to work at the gas station? Harry basically wanted to hide beyond the reach of responsibility. He was a coward who denied and hid from the realities of life. His story, ultimately, is not just one of violence. It's also one of avoidance taken to its most unthinkable extreme. Faced with something he did not want to do and consequences he did not want to accept, he chose annihilation over accountability. Rather than confront his fears, his obligations, or the direction his life was taking, he turned inward, retreating into a mindset where escape mattered more than anything else, even the lives of the only people who loved him. Harry didn't just end lives that day. He erased any chance of becoming anything more than what he already was, a young man unwilling to face the most basic demands of growing up. His story lingers not only because of its brutality, but because of the killer's lack of accountability. A man who destroyed his own family to avoid a future he didn't want has been given a chance to live out the rest of his life in freedom. It raises difficult questions about justice, about rehabilitation, and about whether accountability can ever truly exist without acknowledgement. In a book and even a movie that had been in the works titled Anyone's Son, it was implied that this kind of tragedy can happen to any family. This is true only in an abstract sense. This son, Harry De La Roche Jr., was a coward more than he was ever a son to anyone. Thank you for listening.